Hi, my name is Erin Ulmer, and I will be doing my final presentation on the country of Cuba. I chose Cuba because it has always been a dream of mine to one day visit. I have always been interested in learning about the history and culture of the unique island. Previously, my knowledge on U.S. relations with Cuba was very small because there has been so much going on there. After doing several case studies on Cuba, I feel I have learned so much more, and I'm so excited to share with you all the beautiful country. First, I will start off with an overview of the country. Cuba is a very diverse country with about 11.2 million inhabitants, located just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The country is made up of 15 provinces with its capital in Havana. Cuba makes up 44,200 miles and is the largest Caribbean island. The official language is Spanish, and most of the population practices Catholicism. The vast island was colonized by Spain in 1492 when Christopher Columbus discovered it. Later on, during the Spanish-American War in 1898, the U.S. gained control of Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippine Islands, and Guam after Spain signed a peace treaty. Cuba then became an independent country in 1902. Years later, in 1959, Fidel Castro led a 9,000 guerrilla army into Havana to force Batista's coup to flee and give up power. Castro also gained power this year and became Prime Minister of Cuba. In 1976, Fidel became president and the Cuban Communist Party adopted a socialist constitution. In terms of relations with the U.S., starting in 1961, the U.S. broke off all diplomatic relations and imposed a commercial embargo which cut off trade with Cuba. More recently, however, during Raul Castro's power beginning in 2006, Barack Obama and Raul started taking steps to normalize diplomatic relations in 2014. The emerging new relationship didn't last long when President Donald Trump came into power and put restrictions back on diplomatic relations. As of today, Miguel Diaz-Canel is now the president of Cuba, ending 6 decades of Castro family rule. The country still follows a socialist economic model where the state controls most of the government. Here is an outline of what I'll be talking about in this presentation. First, I will go over education and healthcare in Cuba, then I will talk about their culture and food, and finally, I will end with their trade relations and major exports. I will conclude this presentation with my thoughts and reflection on the country. Cuba's education system has definitely developed the country in a positive way. It now has one of the highest literacy rates in the world at 99.8%, allowing Cuba to lead Latin America in primary education. Every child is guaranteed a free education in Cuba and is typically mandatory until the 9th grade of secondary school. The Cuban government invests a great amount of its national budget into their education, which is subsidized for all of the Cuban population. The country also has one of the highest teacher-to-student ratios at 1 teacher for every 20 students. Cuba also has an excellent healthcare system that is also free to the population. Care is normally organized at the local level where family physicians deliver primary care and preventative services to their patients. Cuba also has a very good doctor-to-patient ratio at about 1 to every 1,000. Because the healthcare system in Cuba covers all citizens, private hospitals or other medical facilities do not exist, so that every person is seen as an equal. Universal programs and vaccinations have almost eliminated large diseases such as chickenpox, tuberculosis, and polio. The healthcare system has yearly checkups on every patient in which doctors visit their home to help prevent disease, which is less expensive for the public healthcare system. Although the system in Cuba does look great, there are some issues that still remain in the healthcare system. The U.S. embargo in the 90s threatened the healthcare system to fall as budget for medical equipment and medicine lessened by nearly 70%. Today, the lack of medical supplies has decreased the healthcare quality because doctors are not able to give out medicine due to the lack of. Cuba's healthcare system is very similar to the rest of Latin America. They strive to focus on preventing disease and illness first through primary care, so patients can become more informative. Cuba has a very vibrant and unique culture based on music, dance, and food. Music is an important part of Cuban culture and is mainly influenced by African and Spanish music. Common dance styles include the mambo, cha-cha-cha, and rumba. Cuban music also serves as a basis of salsa and contributed heavily to the creation of jazz. The cinema is extremely popular in Cuba, and Havana hosts one of the largest film festivals each year in Latin America. This and music serve as an entertainment for friends and family. Baseball is commonly played throughout the country and is Cuba's national sport. The famous sport was introduced to the country in the 19th century, giving way to quality players. Before the 1970s, Cuba's policy on religion was very negative as Cubans were prosecuted and denied jobs and education by the government. In the 70s, however, the government gave Cubans religious freedom with restrictions, which later turned into complete religious freedom in the 90s. Today, 60% of Cubans practice Catholicism. Cuba's rich and flavorful food contributes to the country's unique culture. Most dishes are packed with foods that are abundant and available, such as rice, beans, and plantains. A common dish on the island is arroz con pollo, or chicken and rice. They are also widely known for their fried plantains, Cuban sandwiches, and rich coffee. Because Cuba was first colonized by Spain, their style of food has strong ties to the country, along with others such as Africa and the Caribbean. Havana was an important trading port during the colonial era, and so we see that a lot of the time Spain passed through dropping off cattle and pigs. The Cuban population then incorporated these imports into many Cuban dishes. The Cuban Revolution and U.S. trade embargo soon changed the way Cuban food was produced and tasted. The country had to completely change their diet because of lack of common imports, so new products like wheat, pasta, and pizza entered the country through new ties with the Soviet Union. Chicken and fish started to become more popular than pork because they were so abundant on the island. The U.S. trade embargo and Cuban Revolution really shaped Cuban food into what it is today, with no American influence in their dishes. The majority of Cuba's imports and exports come from European countries. However, China has now become Cuba's largest trading partner in terms of mutual trade. Other major partners include Spain, Brazil, Germany, and Portugal. Following the end of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Fidel Castro's takeover led to severed trade relations with the U.S. An embargo was put into place that cut off all relations with the Cuban government. During Obama's presidency, strict travel relations had been lifted, but the U.S. trade embargo still remained. More recently, however, Donald Trump has put the travel restrictions back in place. Historically, when Cuba was first founded, sugar became a big crop that was harvested. Cuba then basically had a one-crop economy based off the popular sugar cane. Throughout the years, however, the exports in Cuba have grown tremendously. Cuba is now the 143rd largest export economy as of 2016. The island's major exports include raw sugar, rolled tobacco, and hard liquor, with raw sugar being their largest. Cuba's raw sugar export is so large that it makes up about 31% of all their exports, making it their most popular product. In conclusion, this project has allowed me to see a different side of Cuba that the media doesn't really portray. I think that Cuba is a great country and a perfect one to visit if you ever want to be transported back to the 50s. The country has done such a great job of preserving cities like Havana, making it a great tourist destination. I'm excited to see how much more the country will prosper and advance because of recent political change and freedom. The country's healthcare and education system seems to be doing well in helping society, but I'm interested to see how trade relations with the U.S. change even more during Donald Trump's presidency. I would hope that both diplomatic and trade relations with the U.S. will be restored in the years to come. I think with the recent political power change in Cuba, we will start to see many things change. I'm also interested to see if Cuba will continue to preserve their dated country or if they will begin to modernize like the rest of the world.